1993 first exchange trip to China for 3 weeks after the group members continued their individual activities in China. Our group leader, Lisa Yang, attended the first International Shanghai Film Festival. I went to the Yellow Mountain with another group member, painter Yang Long Sheng. We joined an art festival and missed the event. Writer relatives. Under the Overseas Chinese Writers Exchange Program, I went back to China for the first time since I left it as a child. I had with me only a handful of published writings and my foreign accent. From Beijing, Jinan, Jingzhou, Xi'an, Suzhou, Hangzhou, Shanghai. A long journey for me, a warm hearth, a lit lamp. The Great Wall. An immense dragon dancing wildly on the top of the Green Mountains, a first glimpse on the airplane. I climbed to the top where you could see hundreds of miles, opposite the place that you can get a certificate for climbing to the highest spot. Looking at the ants of crowd, we succumbed and went to the other side and fired a cannon with our own hands and several yuan. A cannon! 8 rounds of muffled sound celebrating that we had returned home, a triumph, instead of a warning that the foreign tribes were coming, or echoing the wails of wives seeking their husbands' bodies buried under the bricks. Over 1,000 years during the height of the building, one young man in every 10,000 households throughout China had been forced to come and hand-built the 10,000-mile line of defense, now a relic. The wind was full of clanking of the bones. The white smoke competed with the white plum blossoms dotting the slope outside the wall, until recently enemy territories. The air was pungent with sulfur, the sky an innocent blue-gray. I lost my balance and fell on the stone pavement. Smooth like pebbles, blood oozed out of my kneecap. People gathered around me to watch as I rolled up one pant leg to rub the bruise with an alcohol pad and put a dab of solution from a vial that a kind stranger offered me. Then I covered it with a Band-Aid. He was gone before I could thank him. The bruise stopped stinging. I started climbing again. The next day it looked healed, not red or swollen. I thought of some magic in that potion that the unknown fellow countryman offered me. He was a master healer, only I didn't know it at the time. I had put a George Washington quarter in a crevice in the Great Wall when the guard wasn't watching. I didn't want him to retrieve it as soon as I was out of sight. I wanted someone with a little kid heart like mine, always looking for treasures in every crevice I could look, and to be surprised, happy, and wonder who the man with the little ponytail and the coin was, and where he had come from. The Forbidden City. So many gates. Tiananmen, Qianmen, Jinghaoyangmen, Wumen. So many halls. The Hall of Imperial Harmony, of Middle Harmony, and Full Harmony. So many columns and painted ceilings without using one nail when they were built. So many rooms. 27 years were required to live in each room just once. So many flowers and so many trees in the royal gardens. So many corridors in the living quarters of the emperors, 2 dynasties of them. So many eunuchs coming and going, so many concubines. Most of them did not see the emperor, not even once. We visited where Sheng Fei, the Emperor Guangxu's favorite concubine, lived. The courtyard, full of delicate shades, must have been soothing to the emperor's mind. Here he could relax with his love, but the Dowager Empress was forever intruding a secret death order for Shang Fei to jump into a well. The foreign troops were upon the city. The Dowager Apprentice was escaping with her son, the Emperor, to Xi'an. She wouldn't want the favorite concubine to go along, and it would be far too dangerous for her to leave her behind. Shang Fei had no choice but jump. Nowadays, the well is dry. The tiny lid couldn't cover all of her sorrow. The Summer Palace. Kunming Lake was big. Scent of wild flowers fill the air. Upon entering the east gate, there is a hall of benevolence and long life where Dowager Empress and the Emperor attended state affairs. The long corridor had 700 meters of paintings. The marble barge in the lake for her dining pleasure alone bore the cost of the Imperial Qing Navy. From the Precious Clouds Pavilion, we saw the 17-arch bridge spanning 150 meters to the South Lake Island. There weren't as many tourists as the mainland. A cleaning woman was diligently sweeping the pavement. I asked if I could borrow her broom and gave her 2 won for the privilege to sweep. She flatly refused the money. Then I said I traveled 10,000 miles wanting just to have this opportunity. Once the broom in hand, I wouldn't let go. I couldn't sweep enough. This very ground where Empress Dowager and the Emperor and his concubines once strolled, and see the Hall of Benevolence and Long Life and Marble Barge from the other side. The Temple of Heaven. Glazed blue tile domes and white marble tiers, a sacred ground for the emperors to pray. Now a park, twice the size of the Forbidden City. The round altar, imperial vault of heaven, and the hall of prayer for good harvests all stand in one line, their structures revolving around the divine number 9. People were flying kites on the ample brick leading to the hall of prayer. An old man let me have his yellow kite after I gave him a 20-cent American bird stamp. At the Echo Hall, the sound travels over a 65-meter span. A young woman with a red parasol in hand at the other end motioned her companion to put his ear to the wall. "Dumplings tonight?" I heard a loving whisper. Suddenly, I was hungry. Thin chrysanthemums. The city of Jinan had more than 100 underground springs. Now the most famous ones, the Black Tiger, the Pearl, the Five Dragon, the Gushing, from the ground, had only trickling water. By the Gushing Spring there was a museum of the famous poetess Li Xingjiao of the North Song dynasty, with her poems carved into the stone slabs on the wall. Her husband had suddenly died, and the war was pressing into her city. Her effort to preserve the book collection she and her husband put their whole life into was lost. So were many of her writings, but the famous lines of the wind in the curtains and the thin chrysanthemums survived. We looked at the yellow chrysanthemums surrounding her statue now, so fresh, so bright. Xi'an, the Wei River. Our plane touched the ground at Zhiyang, where the first emperor of Shishing Huangdi in 221 BC made his capital. We crossed the River Wei, where the poet Wang-Lee of the Tang dynasty more than 1,000 years ago wrote his famous poem of goodbye. The city walls of Xi'an were intact. 6 horses could still run side by side on the path leading to the top. At night, we went to see a lantern festival on top of the wall. Rainbow colors instead of black warning smoke. Outside the wall, it was only darkness and a few dim stars. Inside the gates, bright car lights silhouetted the traffic of bicycles and carts. The Big Goose Pagoda. The Emperor Tang Gaozong of 645 AD built the pagoda in memory of his mother. Hence it was called the Temple of Great Maternal Grace. Magnificent views of Xi'an from the top. The monk Zhang translated the Buddhist scriptures he brought back from India into 1335 Chinese volumes. I wonder if the monk was ever distracted by the view outside his window high upon the pavilion, or by the morning chime of the bell tower and the evening sounds of beating drums in the drum tower. And if there was a sequel to the novel about him, Journal to the West, would his disciples, the trickster monkey and the demon pig, pay him a visit at the pagoda and reminisce with their master about the perilous westward journey? Imperial Tombs. Northwest out of Xi'an, on the lowest plain, the Qian tomb of the burial place of Tang Emperor Gaozong and his wife Empress Wu Zetian looked like a small mountain. She was a concubine of Taizong, Gaozong's father. But after the father's death, she became the son's empress. After he died, she took the throne herself and ruled for 21 some years. The famous blank stele commemorated the empress who stood beside the slightly shorter tablet carved with words exalting her husband. The empress was clearly a feminist. She had ordered her own granddaughter, Yang Tai, to be put to death because the young woman and her husband were allegedly plotting against her. The princess's tomb was nearby. She kept watch even after she died. A second son of hers, Prince Zhang Huai, also died, perhaps by her order at age 39. Local women wanted us to ride their horses, to see the tombs of the princess and the prince, and of high officials. They rattled off history more fascinating than our tour guide, as if Empress was her own grandmother. Thanks to the female emperor, however cruel, the villagers enjoyed prosperity, earning tips from telling the stories to the tourists. The Army of Terracotta Warriors. 30 years in the making. With the workforce of 700,000, the tomb of Qing Shi Huang, a huge earth mound looking from the outside and inside an impenetrable fortress, is yet to be excavated. But his warriors, nearby columns of the army of the terracotta soldiers, were already found in the underground corridors, and now were world famous. We were waiting to have our group picture taken with them. The guard asked us to step aside. We were standing on bricks that were more than 2,000 years old, and we had to pay money if we just wanted to stand still. We gladly obliged, and for another 60 yuan we stood right in front of the terracotta soldiers. Each warrior vigilant and brave. We could almost hear them breathe. Their body language told us that they had come from north, south, east, and west, ever ready to serve the despot first emperor of Qing of 221 BC. Huaqing Pool. At Huaqing Pool, people waited in long line to look at the hot spring, where the Emperor Tang Zhaozong and his favorite concubine, Yang Guifi, used to bathe in 10 AD. Their love story bubbled in the poems of Li Bai, Bai Ju Yi, and for more than 1,000 years. The price to bathe in the pool nowadays is exorbitant, so we stood outside and watched the peonies. The sigh of the bamboo. The green of bamboo filled the hotel room like a dream. At night, I heard the light tap at the door. Ying was whispering. She saw a pretty young woman with long hair. Half of her face was in the light, and the other half was in the shade, as if she wanted to tell Ying something. When Ying opened her eyes, she was gone. And would I go to her room to keep her company? We went back to Ying's room. The moonlight was clear, the bamboos still. Their shadows covered the window pane. We kept quiet, and we hoped for the young woman to come back to tell her stories. But the rooster crowed soon after, and the moon shadow faded to make room for the morning sun. Cold Mountain Temple. The bell in the temple struck the lines of poem of a boat mooring at Maple Bridge at night. It was not midnight, but mid-afternoon. There was a long line waiting to ascend to the bell tower. The crisp sounds of the bell with the fallen petals filled the air, much like the frost of yesteryear. West Lake. The lake was famous for snow melting on the broken bridge, autumn moonlight over the mirror lake, 3 ponds reflecting the moon, 2 peaks catching the clouds, a winding path through the wind-blown lotus leaves, early spring on the Sioux Jetty, fish in the flowering stream, even bells of Nanping. Sunset on the Thunder Peak Pagoda, orioles singing hidden in the willow leaves. We walked along jetties, the great Mandarin poets, Bai Ju Yi and Xu Shi, built and rebuilt in the Tang and the Song dynasties. Their genius lingered. Peach blossoms were on the water. Westlake would be just as beautiful with or without the painted boats. The morning sun cast gold on the fish scale waves. Only elderly people were in the breeze, leisurely practicing Tai Chi and be in with the lake of the Qi. Single room. The hotels were luxurious, from Beijing to Xi'an, to Shanghai, Shaozhou, and Hangzhou. 21 days of single rooms, a special treat to us overseas Chinese riders. During the day we took in all the sights and toasted our hosts' hospitalities, the happy hellos, the sad goodbyes. Every night in my single room I cried. I couldn't put down a single word, and I didn't know why. Every character had been etched on my heart. Now I understand. Auld Lang Syne. 72 peaks, 34 caves, 24 streams, 16 springs, 5 seas, 2 lakes, and 2 waterfalls. All have beautiful names. Above the peaks, The sea clouds of Wangshan, the celestial home of gods and immortals, made numerous poets famous. Down in the misty valley the tea plants grow, brews fit for celestial dwellers. Up on the slopes, green pines grew everywhere. The welcoming pine, dreaming pine, kissing pine, dragon pine, reclining pine, twin exploring pines, harp pine, towering pine, farewell pine, resplendent from the cracks of the palatial crags, ghostly beautiful in moonlight, lustrous in snow, against the sea of clouds, the smoke of the rain, the spring haze, the foliage in the fall. All were unsurpassed by the unseen songstress who was hiding in the pines and sang the first 4 notes of Auld Lang Syne, a foreign tune. Its clear, sweet, melancholy twirl accompanied me as I climbed down the winding stone steps of Huangshan along the silent brook. There I saw a crystal clear pond with reflections of clouds, wider than the ones in the sky, and the pale mountain azaleas hiding in them. The nameless bird of Wangshan kept on singing the 4 notes until they became inaudible. As I reached the peach blossom stream, a hot spring at the bottom, her ancestors knew how parting was and passed the heartache on to her through blood.